Blog Talk Radio.
Stay tuned for Covenant Radio, reforming the home, church, and civil government.
Society through regeneration, revival, and biblical reformation through the power of God by proclaiming the supremacy of Jesus Christ and the all-encompassing joy of knowing and serving Him in the church, family, and civil government. Now here's your host, James Brown, Jr.
Greetings and welcome to the Covenantal Report. This is your host, James Brown, Jr., and we are broadcasting live from the heart of Georgia. We want to thank you for your support as this program continues to grow as we work to call America back to our Christian faith and heritage and the founding principles that established a land of liberty. Today we also want to say a special thanks to our veterans on this Veterans Day, and especially my Marine brothers. As yesterday was the birthday of the Marine Corps, thank you for your commitment to duty and courage. As special as these days are, our program takes on a greater significance today. It is a day that I will tell my grandchildren about as we have a special guest. Patrick J. Buchanan, the author of Suicide of a Superpower, is here to discuss his book and the issues that have destroyed our republic. And let me encourage you to purchase this book by going to Amazon or to your favorite bookstore, as this book, Suicide of a Superpower, is a must-read for every American. Patrick J. Buchanan is widely considered as America's leading populist conservative. He was a senior advisor to 3 American presidents. He ran for the Republican nomination in 1992 and 1996. And I must say that I voted for him on each of these occasions, and even when he ran for the Reform Party's presidential candidate in 2000. He is the author of 10 books, 6 of which have been on the New York Times bestseller list, and of course, number 7 will be Suicide of a Superpower. He has appeared on all kinds of shows and programs throughout America, the McLaughlin Group, CNN's Capital Gain, Crossfire, and also has been a commentator on MSNBC. Pat is a resident of the Old Dominion state of Virginia, the home of America's greatest presidents, and also the home of General Robert E. Lee and Lieutenant Stonewall Jackson. I am very confident that history will remember Patrick Buchanan as the Patrick Henry of our time, and so it is with great honor to welcome Mr. Patrick J. Buchanan to the Covenanter program today. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, James, for that very gracious introduction. Overdone a bit, but that's fine.
Well, we really appreciate your sacrifice of time from your busy schedule to be with us, and it is truly an honor to speak with you. You are one of the greatest Americans of our day, and you have written a book that I think is the most important book of our time. And as I read your book, I was completely blown away by the facts of how far we have digressed. And you know, I'm someone that's read all of your books, and I'm very active in political issues, but still yet, you have presented this information in such a way to impress upon the reader the reality and seriousness of our situation. Now, in Suicide of a Superpower, you wrote, America is disintegrating. The centrifugal forces pulling us apart are growing inexorably. What unites us is dissolving, and this is true of Western civilization. That came on the heels of a statement in the preface of your book where you said that we are in the Indian summer of our civilization. So my question is it really that serious? And what do you mean America is disintegrating?
Well, let me Western civilization grew out of Christianity. It rose up in the decaying days of the Roman Empire to really capture the culture and take over the civilization after the Roman Empire fell away. And out of that came Western civilization, Christendom, and the United States of America is, I believe, the greatest product of that civilization. And what is happening now, James, is quite clearly the death of Christianity, the cradle faith of Western civilization, its death in Europe, and its decline and fall in the United States. It is receding. And this, it seems to be undeniable. And the faith is the basis of your moral code, your moral consensus, your ethical code, and one of the things that holds a disparate people together, people who are different in race, color, ethnicity, and political philosophy can stand on common ground if they have a common faith and a common moral code. And we're losing that faith, and the moral consensus has collapsed. And this is the reason we have so many of these clashes called cultural wars, is we got a significant slice of the country which has basically defected from that moral consensus and belongs to an entirely different, if you will, ideology or political religion. And so I don't know how the country stays together because it is such a diverse and disparate country. Otherwise, if we don't have the common faith, and I would add the common belief and understanding of the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. In this disintegration, do you foresee the states seceding from the Union, and will the United States break apart like the Soviet Union?
Well, I do see, toward the middle of this century, the American Southwest will be heavily populated by folks of Hispanic heritage and the Spanish language. There's going to be 135 million Hispanics in the United States, heavily concentrated in the area. Say if you drew a line from Southern California straight over to Brownsville, Texas, and if you got 100 million Hispanics there, I think culturally and socially it will be as much a part of Mexico as it is of the United States, and we will become a binational nation and a bilingual nation. In other words, two languages, Spanish and English, and binational Hispanic and of European descent. And those will be the largest minorities, both of them minorities in the United States. And I can see a real break-off of the Southwest, its return to Mexico, whence to whom it belonged until 1848, most of it. I can see that, but ultimately I don't see secession of the states as much as I see a secession of the heart taking place among millions of Americans who are simply moving away from one another because they have less and less in common and moving into enclaves of their own kind, of their own belief system, of their own values and their own views. There was a book about 10 years, or maybe 5 years back, called The Big Sort, which described how Americans are sorting themselves out and moving together with one another based on these factors: belief, philosophy, religion, politics, and we're balkanizing and moving into enclaves of the like-minded. So those were I think, are the more likely scenarios for the America of the future.
Yes, sir. Well, when we talk about these issues, I run into a lot of people that think we are just grandstanding or we're being a little over the top with some of our conclusions, because I'm constantly reminded that we remain one of the world's only military and economic superpower. So is the title of your book, Suicide of a Superpower, Will America Survive to 2025? That's not that far away. Is that a gross exaggeration, as many people are trying to assume?
Well, I think as a superpower, the United States is receding. It's undeniable. There's a chapter in there called The Long Retreat. American troops are coming home from all over the world. We're drawing down our forces. We cannot balance our budgets. We cannot control or defend our borders. We cannot stop the hemorrhaging of our manufacturing base. We cannot seem to end and win our wars decisively. Your test scores are collapsing in international competition. All of these things are happening. At the same time, the United States is declining in relative terms as an economic power, and China is rising. By 2025, clearly, China, unless something dramatic intervenes, China is going to be a major global military superpower, and it's going to be an economic power larger than the United States. So certainly our reign as the last and lone superpower is coming to an end. And I think when you see what is happening internally, it's going to be hard to describe the United States as a superpower. I think we will be one of the world's great powers, undeniably, for the indefinite future. But I don't. The idea that we're going to remain the lone superpower and everyone will defer to the United States, those days are over.
Yes, sir. And that is a scary situation as I think about China sitting on top and what that's going to mean for my children and grandchildren. In the book, you spend a lot of time on the decline of Christianity in general and Roman Catholicism in particular. And although America remains overwhelmingly Christian, you wrote, the last consequences of a dying Christianity is a dying people. Are we really dying, and what does the death of Christian America, one of the chapters of your book, what does that really mean?
Well, when I say when the faith dies, the culture dies. We see a disintegration of American culture. Everybody recognizes that. The civilization begins to die, and the people begin to die. Now, in the chapter Demographic Winter in Suicide of a Superpower, I detail the fact that there is not a single country of Western Europe or Eastern Europe or Southern Europe that has a birth rate that will enable it to survive in its present form until the end of this century. Not a single one reaches zero population growth. Take Italy. Its population growth, its women, the average woman there has 1.4 children, which is only two-thirds of what is needed to replace the existing population. That says in every future generation will be one-third smaller than the present generation. So what you're looking at, Russia, the numbers are specific. Russia's going to lose 25 million more people. It's already lost 10 million in the last 20 years. And the eastern part of Russia will, I think, because the population out there is so tiny and there's so many hundreds of millions of Chinese, I think Siberia and the Russian Far East will simply devolve to China the way certain towns in the American Southwest are now more a part of Mexico than they are of the United States. I think that's inevitable. Germany's going to lose 8 or 10 million people. The Baltic republics will lose something like 25 to 30% of their people. Romania and Bulgaria are going to lose 10 million people. These are projections of UN statistics based on birth rates that go back for 35 years. You can't change some of these birth rates. You're not going to have more people 21 years old than you've got born right now in 2030. So I think what is happening is all these countries are losing population, and how will they take care of the increasing number of elderly and aged and infirm with a diminishing base of workers? And the answer is mass immigration. And in Europe, it's going to come from the Islamic world as it is now. And in the United States, it will mostly probably come from Asia, in California and places like that, and Mexico and Latin America. And this is happening to all these countries. In Russia, the Islamic groups coming up through the North Caucasus will tear those areas away from Russia, just as Russia lost two-thirds or one-third of its entire territory in 1991. All these things, it seems to me, are easily predictable based on the birth rates.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir, and that's a scary thought, thinking about the Islamic world taking care of you or I when we are elderly to the point where we need help. A lot of people that I run into in America, throughout Georgia and so forth, they overwhelmingly proclaim to be Christian. And what I have found that they mean by that is that they are Christian because they're not Muslim. Why does private religious belief matter on these topics that we are discussing?
Well, I think General Washington and John Adams and Webster and de Tocqueville, all of whom I quote there, argue that without religion and the morality that is a product of religion, you cannot maintain a constitutional republic. which is dependent upon the character of its citizens and their disposition to obey legitimate law. And if you have a death of a cradled civilization and you have the privatization of morality, every man decides for himself, there are a number of things happen. And one of them I describe in the book, again with many statistics. It is social decomposition, the breakdown of society, a rise in crime, in dropout rates, in drug rates, in crime rates, and incarceration rates, illegitimacy rates. The illegitimacy rate among African American in the late 1940s was about 8%. It's now 71%. Among Hispanic Americans, who were regarded as traditionalist, conservative, and Catholic, it's 51%. Even among white Americans, it's now 28%. It used to be 2%. So I think from that you see a rise in the gang membership. Young people or boys especially, seeking out a family they never knew, and you got these decline in test scores of Americans and dropout rates that are astronomical in the urban areas. And all of these things are manifestations of a country that has lost its tough core beliefs and values and faith and commandments, if you will, or they're being ignored. And so, these things are inevitable, and there's another result of it, as I mentioned, and others, but these are the people that I cite in there are philosophers and others. And one observed rather wisely, he said, when people cease to believe in God, they do not then believe in nothing. They will believe in anything. And so what happens when the Christianity dies in the heart and soul, something else enters and captures it. Now, it may be ideology, socialism, or environmentalism, or some other Islam, or something like that, but that's what we see happening. And that results in not only in cultural wars, but in a general breakup of society.
Yes, sir. There's so many things that I would like to ask you, but the biggest portion of the book deals with a topic from which you have received the most opposition and slander. You wrote in the book, Suicide of a Superpower, the last consequences of a dying Christianity is a dying people. Not one post-Christian nation has a birth rate sufficient to keep it alive. The death of European Christianity means the disappearance of the European tribe, a prospect visible in the demographic statistics of every Western nation. And then you also wrote, white America is an endangered species. By 2020, whites over 65 will outnumber those 17 and under. Deaths will exceed births. The white population will begin to shrink, and should present birth rates persist, slowly disappear. What is the death of, or the end of white America? Are we experiencing it? Are we really going to see it in our lifetime? And could you explain what that tells us? And is, in reference to that, a race war inevitable?
Well, the late Carl Rowan, the black columnist who worked for Lyndon Johnson for a while, wrote a book in 1995 called The Coming Race War. Now, I don't know that that's going to happen, and I certainly hope it doesn't happen. But I will say this, it is undeniable, and the title, The End of White America, is simply the same title that Atlantic Magazine used on a cover story in 2009. Everybody is coming to recognize, and some are celebrating the fact, that white Americans will be a minority now. The year they put it at is 2041. And some people, Frank Rich and others, are celebrating this fact, and they say we will be a better country. And I'm not so sure, because what holds us together, if we are all, with due respect, people who say that diversity is a strength, racial and ethnic diversity have usually resulted in wars and massacres of one tribe trying to kill another. And what brought all of us Americans together was a common ground. And the common ground on which we stood was not race, but we rose above that to a constitutional republic and the Christian faith. And this was the ground on which we could all stand together. But when that goes and we throw that out, I'm not sure what holds us together. As I describe a nation, it is it generally has a common ethnic core. For example, the Frenchmen are Frenchmen, whether they have a monarchy, a revolution, an empire, or a republic. They're still Frenchmen. So you have that one thing that can bring us all together. What enabled the Germans to come together after 50 years of division in the Cold War? It was their ethnic character of the two halves of Germany that they wanted to be together, whereas Czechoslovakia came apart. Yugoslavia came apart into 7 countries. Russia came apart into 15 countries, and it's still disintegrating. So along the lines of race, ethnicity, and religious faith, tribalism. And so these forces, the only thing that can overcome some of these very powerful forces, which Schlesinger and Pat Moynihan, my old friend, said are going to be the dominant forces, are you need common ground to stand upon if we're going to be united. And what I'm arguing in this book is, friends, we are destroying the common ground. And when we do, I don't know what holds us together. Now, I'm not as apocalyptic as Rowan saying it's going to be a race war, but I do think people are gradually moving apart, and they're moving apart on the basis of race and ethnicity, as well as ideology and politics.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir, and this is something that is happening all throughout Europe and even including United States, Canada, and Australia. Describe for our listeners what the Democratic winter of the West is all about, as you have defined in your book, consisting of even including Russia and Germany and the Ukraine and all these nations that are dying.
Well, demographic winter is what I just said a little while ago. That it is that not a single Western nation, among its native-born, Europeans say, has a birth rate that will enable it to survive. They haven't had a birth rate that will enable it to survive, most of them, for 30 or 35 years. And we're seeing the effects of this now, where in Germany, each new generation is smaller than the previous one, and the UN projects a loss of 8 or 10 million people in 40 years. In Russia, it's 25 million more. But the truth is, these countries, the native-born populations are going to die, but because many of these countries are well-developed and there's housing there, and I think people are going to move in and take the places of the people who were never born, either because of birth control or abortion or whatever. And the people coming in are the surplus peoples of the world. And the Muslim population is now 1.5 billion people. Africa is expected to double its population from 1 billion to 2 billion and to 3 billion by the end of the century. So this is where the people are going to come to reoccupy the emptying cities and towns of Europe. It seems to me inevitable, and to take care of the aged and dying native-born. And this is taking place now. I mean, we heard all the talk of death panels, and the aging populations now in some countries are going to places like Switzerland to get the assisted suicide and to mercy killing and things like that, to leave this world more peacefully and in less horrible terms than otherwise. So I think this is what you're seeing right before our eyes. Now, it's in an early stage, but the stage has progressed long enough so that you see that the figures that I used in Death of the West, which was 10 years ago, they're all unfolding exactly. They're very, very little changed in the numbers that we projected back there 10 years ago. And so I simply project them out to mid-century, which is not all that far off. Children born today, when they turn 40, this will be the world they're living in.
Yes, sir. Well, we've talked about the conclusions from these statistics concerning Europe and America. What's the future of the GOP?
Call the rectory.
Yeah.
It's a Catholic expression. Let me say, look, America, given the way things are going now, and the best projection I can make of what America is going to look like is California today, where the white population, the European population, has become a minority and is leaving California. And California itself has stopped growing on net because the white population is leaving, whereas the illegal aliens coming in are moving into California. Now, if you take a look at the demography of California, the demography of every state in the Union is going to, on average, look like that. And what does that mean for the Republican Party? Well, the Republican Party in California used to be the great bastion of the Republican Party. Richard Nixon carried California 5 times on presidential tickets. Ronald Reagan carried it all 4 times he ran in landslides. California hasn't gone Republican in 5 presidential elections. There's not a single Republican in statewide office. The Republicans in the state legislature are outnumbered almost 2-1. Orange County, the home of the John Birch Society and of John Wayne and birthplace of Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan's strongest county almost, is now only 45% Republican. And there's the New York Times fellow who went through Orange County, said parts of it look like parts of the third world. I mean, people have moved in and settled in and maintained their identity and maintained a strong enough base so that they can maintain their own community in a multicultural county. And so I think if you look at where California is, that is where Texas is going next, and that is where America is going. And there's the problem for the Republicans is that half the people in the country, half the wage earners almost, pay no federal income taxes and are eligible for an enormous number of benefits, which they get free. And why would you vote for a Republican that's going to cut your capital gains taxes if you haven't got any capital gains?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, our time is greatly fleeting, and but in the next minute or so, you concluded your book by saying America is entering a time of troubles, and we talk about all these things in the GOP in Europe, and it's very grim and disheartening. But what must we do, and what can the grassroots do to get America back on track?
Well, I think in some of these problems, as I said, I don't have any answers to how you turn around the anti-Christian revolution, which has triumphed in a significant slice of the country. That takes someone like the 12 apostles in St. Paul. We'll drop Judas out of there, the 11 in St. Paul. And and so I don't know how to do that. I do have some ideas you could turn around because I've been arguing about it for 20 years, how you stop this hemorrhaging of your manufacturing, how you call a holiday on immigration until unemployment is at 6%, how you try to get the melting pot working again and convert folks into Americans. Many of them coming here want to become Americans. Those things I think we could do something about if we get a Republican president and a Republican Senate and a Republican House, and the fiscal problems could be really attacked. And so I think that is the indispensable thing in the next year is a change in government. We have to get rid of this government. It has failed the country. I don't bear an animus to the president, but he has clearly not lived up to his promise, and I think he has a failing administration. But beyond that, I don't know how you turn some of these things around. I mean, if you're in a dive at some points, you have to say, look, we're not going to pull out of this one.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And unfortunately, I believe that you're 100% correct. Mr. Buchanan, our time is come and gone, but before we go, I want to thank you for your love of God, our heritage, our founding principles. May God grant you grace and blessings through Jesus Christ and give you many more years to keep sounding this clarion alarm, calling our people back to our Christian and constitutional roots. Sir, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
Thank you very much, James. I've enjoyed it.
Yes, sir. So have we. God bless you, and long live the Buchanan Brigade. Well, folks,
thanks for those
just heard. Yes, sir. You're very welcome. You have just heard the seriousness of the hour, and we want to end the admonition from 1 Chronicles 19:13. Be of good courage, and let us behave ourselves valiantly and for our people and for the cities of our God, and let the Lord do that which is right in His sight. Check out our website at www.covenantcommission.org. Until next time, may God bless and may God save America.
same time by Covenant Commission. You can listen online at covenantcommission.org or at blogtalkradio.com/Covenant Commission. Each show is archived for your listening convenience. All broadcasts are made available free of charge. Covenant Commission Ministries is made possible by your generous support, and we thank you for listening.